Hi everyone and welcome to Give Me the Remote. This is episode 14 on the 9th of December. Oh, September.
It's not quite Christmas time yet.
I just want it to be Christmas.
And you are?
I'm Sheridan.
And I'm John. Having bumbled our way through the entry, what have we got for the listeners today?
Let's start off with Who is America?
Sacha Baron Cohen's evisceration of America. And the lawsuits are really starting to fly over this as well.
They are. So 7 episodes.
Yep.
It's on Stan here.
Yes.
You can download it on Stan at the moment. So basically, he kind of goes back to his Ali G days where he creates some personas and interviews them.
Interviews other people using them.
Yes, yeah.
Who are unwitting as to the gag.
Yeah, so they don't know that it's not a real person. Obviously, because he's quite famous, he has to wear a lot of prosthetics and heavy makeup. But I think he actually pulls them off pretty well. Like, they look pretty real.
Yeah, I think, and the ones that are over the top, like his Israeli Special Forces soldier,
Aaron Morad.
Whose rank changes every episode.
I feel as though Aaron Morad is the most fully formed and believable, but also important.
He's also ludicrous, but the people he's interviewing desperately want to believe in him.
Yeah, so I mean, there's been real consequences for people that have been interviewed on this show. Like
lawmakers have had to resign, and
yeah. So Jason Spencer, who was a Georgian state representative. Yeah, I know. So Aaron Morad interviews him on the premise that he's going to appear in an Israeli training video so that it's not going to appear in America. And how to fight terrorists.
Like anyone who drops their trousers and runs towards another man ass backwards on camera.
So Morad convinces him that a strategy to get rid of a terrorist is to drop your pants and run at them with your bum because
they're not gay.
Terrorists are scared of homosexuals. Yeah, it's pretty... It's unbelievable that people could do this stuff.
Look, I think I've always been slightly worried with the Sacha Baron Cohen shtick in that it does tend towards being deeply unfair towards his audience. And there are parts in this where he's met with steely civility by his interview subjects, and they refuse to be drawn. And at least they're shown...
Well, they're the smarter ones, obviously.
The smarter ones, but it does actually cross the party divide. There are, well-known left-wing figures and some right-wing figures, particularly the couple who invite him around to dinner.
Another one of his
refuse to be drawn with his bad manners.
So another one of his characters is I can't remember his
the liberal
name, but it's Dr. Nira or something. He plays a left-wing gender studies lecturer or professor. A caricature, who talks about things like making his daughter urinate while standing up so she doesn't have to conform to gender stereotypes, letting his daughter who's menstruating perform something that's called free bleeding, which one can only imagine what that is.
Yeah, or talking about his wife mating with dolphins.
It's very out there.
Yeah.
And actually I think this show does kind of highlight that left-wing thinkers aren't very good at making fun of themselves.
I don't think you could draw any of those conclusions. I'd also, to get back to the unfairness and occasional cruelty of the format, there's a problem in that, this is what they keep. You don't know how many hundreds of hours were captured and weren't funny. But also, you can find stupid people and video them doing stupid things in Australia or in the United Kingdom. You could definitely find them in France. You can find them in Russia. There's no corner of the world where you can't choose to find people, egg them on into being stupid, and then paint this as a caricature of a nation.
Yeah, but my point about the left-wing characters are... So the characters that are the right-wing ones, so the alt-right YouTuber or whatever he does, like podcaster or whatever,
Yeah.
conspiracy theorist, that is a believable character based on a real stereotype that exists, and it's funny.
I would say it's believable to you and I, but it would probably be less believable to people of the, the type being caricatured.
Well, I just think the left-wing characters are not very believable or funny. They're just sort of stupid. And also, when he interviews left-wing people, he fails to really put them under the same kind of microscope, or he's not as hard on them as he is on the right-wing people that he interviews.
It could be he didn't find it was harder to find crazy ones. That's possible. We just don't have the data to say,
Well, I mean, Bernie Sanders is on there, and it's like
he manages to comport himself well. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I just didn't think it was very funny.
No, I mean, that's the trouble when someone does comport themselves well, it's not funny. I would say there are moments of screaming funniness in this show. And
there's heaps, but my point is just that I don't think left-wing, as a generalisation, and I think this show is an example of it, that people from the left are very good at laughing at themselves.
I just don't think the show gives us enough information to draw that conclusion. You might be correct in that. I just don't think this show proves it.
Well, I don't think any of the... Well, then at a minimum, what I'm saying is any time this show tries to be humorous about the left, I think it kind of fails.
There's a couple of moments, like when the gender studies professor is trying to introduce a mosque in a rural town. That was pretty funny.
That was fun. But actually, again, that was him poking fun at the right, because it's the audience members who are right-wing that you end up laughing at or just being shocked by.
Yeah, and I guess if you're of a blazing right-wing to the point of insanity perspective, then this show's just mean and nasty.
There are some extreme... I think, though, your point about it sometimes being nasty is true. There's a Bachelorette contestant whose name is Corinne Olympios or something, who is basically set up to for a campaign for fighting Ebola, and she's photographed in a sexy hazmat suit and photoshopped into Ebola scenes. Now, if you read the full commentary about what actually happened to her, is the producers of that show took her away from her agent and any sort of support network, completely isolated her, and she actually said that she was quite afraid and ended up just doing what they said because she just wanted to get out of there because she felt so uncomfortable. And also, I don't really see what benefit we get from poking fun in that way to a Bachelorette contestant. I mean, she was never a public figure.
I think she had a bigger public profile in the US than she does here, which is why they.
But it'd be the same as like trying to do this with like Sophie Monk. I mean, what's the point of that? I mean, I can get if you're trying to make fun of the cult of celebrity. I'm not going to defend
Sacha Baron Cohen's decision making,
but there was something a little bit misogynist about that, and quite.
Oh, some of the things he did to foolish right-wing men, getting them to dress as women and get arrested, and there's a great deal of unkindness and cruelty to go around in this show.
Yeah, but anyway, there's only one female producer. There are no female writers on this show, and I think it does show, because I don't think that would necessarily have gotten through if there was a more diverse production crew behind it.
Yeah. So it's a show that's got problems, and yet at the same time there are some serious strains of nutbaggery that does expose that you wouldn't have quite believed that people were that crazy or bad. Yeah,
well, I've actually just spent the whole time ripping into this show, but I think the show's actually really, really good. I think it's really funny, and I think it's actually really important that shows like this keep getting made, because through satire is one of the ways that we can evaluate the absolute crazy nutbag political circumstances we find ourselves in, especially America.
Yeah, well, I mean, particularly the gun lobbyists who are completely there's they'll sign up for kids with guns. There's no line in the sand anymore where they can look at and say, you know what, more guns isn't the answer over there.
Yeah.
There's no horizon for their madness now, and it's useful to see that. I mean, I'd probably give it 4 stars, and
I'd give it 4 stars. I just don't. There was just something that sat quite uncomfortably with me about a couple of the segments, and that's just sort of but I've taken those aside. I'll give it 4 stars.
I will also say Sacha Baron Cohen will always have cringeworthy moments in what he does. That's a part of his act.
Yeah, I know.
I'd also say this is probably better than just about anything else he's done, which is not to say it's still not got a lot of flaws.
I think it's more of... I think this is what you expect from Sacha Baron Cohen. Political, but stupid, and clever, but kind of cringeworthy.
All right, words to live by.
What's next?
Veep.
Veep. So a bit of an oldie, but a goodie.
The third coming of Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
What was the second?
The New Adventures of the Old Christine.
Oh God, no, that was horrible. That should have died. So HBO.
Yes.
I think you can get it in Australia on Foxtel.
Correct.
Probably Apple as well. I think we're into season 7, which is 7. Actually, season 7 is going to be the last one, and that's next year.
Yeah.
So
we've watched up to the end of season 5.
Yeah.
And it's another huge slew of Emmys for it. I mean, this is an Emmy machine. Yeah.
So concept is Julie Louis-Dreyfus plays a senator who becomes vice president.
Yep. And president.
And president. Spoiler.
That's only mid-arc.
True, and it doesn't really... it's not really a plot twist sort of show. Like, it's about the jokes.
Yeah, it's about the jokes. I mean, it's Arnaldo, I think his name's pronounced Iannucci. I could be wrong on that.
I think that's right.
Who wrote the Thick of It on British TV. And I really struggled when I heard, he'd written The Thick of It, and he'd written this show Veep. I turned first season of Veep. Just wasn't that biting or funny. It just seemed more like, here's a motorcade, here's some flags, here's some people talking about politics. And then it really took off in the second season, I felt.
Yeah, I think it took a little while to find its feet. And I think actually you needed to see the dynamics between all of the characters for it to become funny. Because you kind of have to work out, you've got Selena, who's Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character, is kind of like, obviously she's the centre of the narrative, but she kind of plays this sometimes bitchy, sometimes...
Very human, I would say.
Yeah, but she's quite obviously driven solely just to advance her political career, which a lot of politicians are, and that's the joke. You got like kind of the bumbling, he starts off as an intern.
Talking about
Jonah.
Right.
But then, develops his own political career solely based on his own personal background. The tired media advisor, and then a whole bunch of other kind of, I guess stereotypes you'd find in a political office. And I think it takes a little while for all those characters to kind of come out and work out who they are and how they play off each other. And that kind of has to happen in the first season.
I agree. I still think the writing got a lot funnier and a lot sharper, and they basically let the writers off the hook and let them be deeply unpleasant in very funny ways.
Yeah. They're all horrible people.
Yeah.
But there's some crazy one-liners.
And it also gave the world, what was it? Consistency with change? Or continuity with change. Which is the buzzword of Australian politics. Over and over, we can't get away from it.
So, they're 30-minute episodes, so they're kind of good to... You can eat through a whole packet of these pretty quick. in a night.
It is really good binge TV, and I think it works better binged as well because you can get that continuity of the character arcs that if you're just watching in little chunks week to week wouldn't work as well.
Yeah, that's true. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is just awesome in this though. Like, because you know, I remember how Elaine was quite. I mean, they're obviously totally different characters, but Elaine was quite sort of goofy, and she played that character with a real, quite physically.
I think it shows what a brilliant actress she is.
Yeah,
that
and
her
she does that in this.
Largely unrecognisable. Admittedly, there's 25 years in between.
Oh God, there can't be. Can there?
Maybe 20 years. Anyway, there's a significant period of time between her playing the characters, but a bit like Jeff Bridges at his best, I would say, who's an actor who can turn up in all sorts of different movies, and you don't even necessarily realise that it's the same actor playing all these different characters because he's just a very good actor. And similarly, I would say this is part of demonstrating what a actually very fine actor Julia Louis-Dreyfus also is, in that she can be quite distinct in her characters.
Yeah, you completely forget she's who she is. She is Selena Myers.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's a very physical kind of actor. That kind of physical comedy, she's really good at. I think she was really good at as Elaine with that as well.
The sound of a dog shaking itself. Yep.
There are some really important kind of commentary on political life as a woman as well that I think is quite clever and important television, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's done organically to the content though, so it's not too heavy-handed.
No, it's not like a feminist fist pump.
No, far from it. In fact, it's mostly showing that women can be just as awful as men.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think at the same time, it does actually show the travails of its characters pretty well, and that's a really good and important thing to do.
Yeah,
I think good storytelling can cover those things without needing to beat the audience over the head about it.
So are we rating the whole seasons 1 to 5?
Yeah, why not?
All right, what are you gonna go?
4.5 stars.
I'm gonna go 5 stars.
5 stars.
Yeah.
A flawless performance.
Well, I rewatched this show,
even with the dodgy season 1.
Yeah, I think you can forgive a dodgy season 1.
Okay.
And I rewatch this show all the time.
Yep. No, I mean, it's got huge rewatchability because the jokes are so fast and so layered and so cruel that you can watch the same episode twice back to back and still only pick up you wouldn't get everything that's in there.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even laugh out loud, but you kind of end the episode feeling like, wow, that was really hilarious. Yeah.
Cool. So what's next?
Well, I think if we're going to go from 5-star political satire, we should go to... Well, I'll leave you in suspense on my star rating, but it's going to be low. Political satire, and that is the current season of Rake, which is season 5. So Rake is an Australian comedy, which basically started off as showing this character, Cleaver Green, who was a Sydney criminal barrister, and he had drug and alcohol and gambling problems, and just basically his life as a womanising kind of... Yeah,
a louche character. I mean, not just womanising, because he was using sex workers as well. So
true. A lovable rogue is, I think, what you would...
They try and paint him as a lovable rogue until... my biggest problem with this show is I thought it was just funny, and then they kept referencing Charles Waterstreet, who the character is... it varies how much it's based on, depending on the politics of where Charles Waterstreet is in the public eye at any given moment.
Charles Waterstreet's having having a Me Too moment right now, so they're kind of distancing themselves.
Yeah, but if Charles Waterstreet is a vile character,
so he's a real life barrister in Sydney.
Yeah, he's physically repulsive.
I don't even know how he could still be practicing law. He's old as.
I think he has to because he's got bills to pay. But he's physically repulsive, and then he'll make these horrible comments in the media about how he's got a stake in some new brothel opening up, and then he'll lick his lips and talk about how he plans to sample the wares to ensure quality, and it's vile. And if you just watch Richard Roxburgh playing Cleaver Green in this, then you're like, oh, he's so charming, because Richard Roxburgh is a charming, handsome dude.
Yeah.
Right? But once you find out it's this, based on this other, viler, much more sinister character, a lot of the charm goes out the window for me.
Oh, totally. So anyway, season 5 is Cleaver
unexpectedly finds himself in the Australian Senate.
because his last name's Green, and apparently he picks up all the Greens voters.
I think there was confusion
on the
with his sister who was on the ticket as well.
And that. So there's these sort of... He gets in there through this hapless sort of circumstance.
To be fair, the Australian Senate voting system has created some very unlikely senators in the last 10 years.
True.
So I think they were trying to play on that zeitgeist of the unlikely senator, which we have produced a few of lately, and we're still looking to fix up that voting system because it's causing some troubles with these people who just... I wouldn't like to say people don't belong in politics or shouldn't be in politics, but they actually tend to be pretty ratty, sleazy operators sneaking in, and if we were getting more of just every person's... I mean, more Ricky Muirs, I actually think the Senate could do with more of. Less Pauline Hanson types.
True.
Yeah.
Anyway, we digress. So, Rake... so we haven't watched the whole series.
No, it's still dripping every week. In fact, the next episode is out in 2 hours.
So... I don't know what happened to the writers on this show. Or maybe it was just always this bad. Or maybe the show only had 2 seasons worth of sort of good stories in it. Which would have been season 1 and 2. But this show is just stupid and terrible. And he is horrible in this. So... I mean, he is an awful, awful boss.
He's never been a good boss.
The abuse that Nicole takes as his now chief of staff, formerly his secretary, is just criminal, frankly.
Yeah, because we live here in Canberra. All of the stuff set in Canberra is just wrong.
Well, they do this stupid thing where, and I mean, they had to do it. I feel sorry for them. Apparently they were refused filming in our Parliament House, and they didn't have a budget to produce a set that replicated New Parliament House. So a terrorist attack occurs, and then they all have to move into the old Parliament House.
Where they have got permission to shoot.
Where they have got permission to shoot. But it's just, I mean, it's just dumb. It's
even the
stupid
scenes
story.
in Old Parliament House are problematic to me. I mean, I used to work in Parliament House for 8 years, so I know that building extremely well. I don't know Old Parliament House as well, but there's still lots of things where the corridors are wrong, and I guess I'm sure Veep annoys Washington insiders to the same degree. Generally, with Rake, the seasons do start pretty poorly and then get better, and I've got a sense this one's kind of doing the same thing. It has
gotten a little bit better.
It's the first 2 seasons were very much just about the operation of criminal law in New South Wales, and I thought it did a good job on that. The next 2 seasons concentrated on the corruption of state government in New South Wales, and I thought did a very valuable role in doing what good satire should always do, in that by changing the names and changing the characters, they were still able to they were able to show the corrupt nature of the beast in a way that if you'd done it as a straight documentary expose, you'd have been sued out of existence. So I think it was valuable in some ways on some of those things, but I'm just really struggling. I think when they're trying to do particularly international affairs, the Americans and the Chinese...
Anthony LaPaglia comes in and plays Secretary of State from the US and goes on this sort of debauched, coke binge.
When they actually got on the binge, that was quite fun to watch, but the prelude to it was all weird.
But it was just a dumb character. You could see Anthony LaPaglia straining, how am I saying these lines? They're so
he couldn't get his accent right though, and he thought he'd lived in America long enough to get his accent right.
He's played Americans on TV in America, so
the Anthony LaPaglia cameo was awful and poorly handled, and wasn't even that expensive or difficult to get right was what annoyed me, because, you know, the interior of a jet, they got that bit right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the long-term characters, I mean, Missy, who starts off in season 1 as being a prostitute that, or sex worker that Cleaver Green sees.
Yeah.
Now she is the mother of Cleaver's son's child, which just seems like lazy writing to keep her in the show.
But she's not even doing anything particularly interesting.
But now she's turned into this sort of manic, crazy, do-gooder mum living with Wendy, the ex-wife, and they hate each other. And it's just like, why are you living there?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Makes no sense.
It appears to have a lot of problems. Maybe they'll resolve some of them. They are doing quite interesting stuff with a subplot around what the Comcar drivers get up to, which I think that's an interesting element of Australian politics that's underexplored, because those guys do definitely operate some weird networks that get up to some weird stuff. Hopefully I won't end up in a car with one of them anytime soon, having said that, but yeah, I mean, some things are okay, some things are actually quite good, and then there's a lot of things that are just awful. You know, Richard Roxburgh being charming still doesn't help the fact that I find the character he's based on in Charles Waterstreet to be not something I think should have been celebrated in the first place.
Yeah, I think the charm's really worn off, and I'm going to give it 1 star.
1 star, wow. I would say if you're looking for a bit of fun, the first 4 seasons of Rake, I would still...
I'm rating this season.
Sure, yeah, but for an audience that has is seeing Rake come up in their streaming services or wants to go looking for it.
Yeah, season 1 and 2 are great.
You didn't like 3 or 4?
I don't really remember 4. Season 1 to 3 is good.
Okay. I would go as far as season 4. Season 5 might redeem itself, but has got enormous structural problems that are giving us a lot of grief. I will give it 2.5 stars.
Ooh,
but
generous.
yeah.
What's next?
White Fang.
Not to be confused with the 1991 film White Fang.
Is there a 1991 White Fang?
I think it apparently has Ethan Hawke in it.
Yeah, right.
So this is the 2018 White Fang.
The French one.
It is French, available on Netflix.
Yeah.
But it's been overdubbed with...
Yeah, it's not a French film in that sense, but it is made by French people, so, yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I thought there was 2 versions.
And that's why there's the Luxembourg Philharmonic doing the soundtrack. And I think why the animation is quite unusual. It's a very watercolory.
I thought the animation
style.
was beautiful.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
It makes it very...
And you don't normally like animated movies at all, do
I
you?
don't usually like animated movies. And I really liked this, and I thought that they did a really good job with the animals.
Mm-hmm. I had a slight problem in that the good people all looked nice and the bad people all looked ugly.
That is true.
And that concerns me on some levels for in your character, because in my experience, there's quite a lot of good-looking people who are terrible human beings, and quite a lot of ugly people who are okay human beings. Although I will also note there are many awful human beings who are also physically ugly. I just don't think there's a strong correlation between physical beauty and decency.
And probably didn't really need such an obvious display of character through physical appearance, because I don't think this movie is well suited for small children.
They do keep all the violence off screen.
Yeah, but it's pretty disturbing.
Yeah, it is disturbing. Yeah.
If you had a sensitive kid, they would be like bawling their eyes out.
Yeah, I think. My parents bought me this book when I was around 7 years old.
So it's based on Jack London's 1906 book.
Yeah, and he also had another one that was quite similar, called Call of the Wild.
Yeah.
And I mean, these books, it's weird that these books become so political and get banned, and Australians thought they were going to get banned when we were going to outlaw communism in this country, and then that referendum failed. But there was a period when people were very worried that the books were going to get banned, and people buried them in their backyards. Only in the 1950s.
Nazis burnt them during the war.
Yeah, the Nazis were really dead against it. And you look at the text and you say, what are you against here? Because you could say there's an allegory for the way the dogs get treated by the bad humans, to say some humans treat animals badly, and that's not nice. And that's a hard argument to fight against.
Yeah.
I don't know who wants to die on that hill, but apparently Nazis and Australian communist fighters do. And also, because literally my parents bought me these books, which is why I got very confused when I started hearing about these things as a teenager, because my parents are not noted communists. They're noted Rotarians, but they're not noted communists, and they obviously thought the books were not only okay for me to read, but suitable as Christmas presents. So I really should talk to them at some point about what was going on with that. So up there with J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan or The Wind in the Willows, Call of the Wild and White Fang were very important parts of my literary childhood. And I thought, while they left bits of White Fang out of this, you can't put everything in a book into a movie. No,
and apparently it does dial back the violence a bit.
It just moves most of the violence off screen.
Yeah, you still know. I mean, there's a lot of humans beating animals into submission.
Yes. Although I think on the dog trails of the Yukon, that would certainly not be an unrealistic portrayal.
True, but the Native Americans who had their dogs on the Yukon weren't treating their dogs as badly as the...
Yeah, I think they might have been. I would need to see some deeper studies into whether that was in fact notably the case.
But there's a lot of themes about sort of taming animals, or trying to make creatures conform.
Yeah, but I mean the tale about just the Indian people. At least they got some sort of justice, that they weren't driven off their land, but they were told they had to pony up an enormous amount of money quickly to claim their own land back from the gold miners. It certainly indicated that injustice of dispossession, even if it probably sugar-coated that bit.
Yeah, and there's several points in the film where separation, the theme of separation from your community or loved ones. I mean, it's very sad.
Yeah.
It's quite... makes you tear up a few times, I think.
Oh, yeah. Movie. No, it does. I mean, the book is a great story, and this movie is a really good handling of it.
And the Native American character is voiced by a Native American actor, which I think is great.
Oh, there you go. Well done, the French. Yep.
I'm pretty sure, anyway.
Anyway, that's... look, this was a real surprise find. We were looking for something else, and it popped up in the search results, and so it's like, oh.
The two main characters, the man and the woman, kind of good
the sheriff
humans.
And his
I think
wife.
there's only 4 human characters in the show, but main characters.
Mm-hmm.
They're both from Parks and Recreation.
Are they?
So there's this weird Parks and Recreation sort of cast going on in this, which is do not expect to see Parks and Recreation if you watch this film, but it's kind of funny.
So I think what we can say here is this is a really good fun movie to just chuck on for 90 minutes.
I thought it was a really beautiful and thought-provoking and... Yeah.
I think the story is, as like I said, is a classic, albeit a very... a classic for young people.
Yeah.
I also think you should take notice of Jack London, just to say, if this is something that really inspires hatred in fascist governments or anti-communist governments, you got to at some point say, which side am I going to be on? And I want to be on the side of the people who at least worry about the treatment of animals, also worry about the treatment of humans, which is the allegory I think that upsets them, but worry about how powerful people treat people with less power. And if that makes you a banned communist, then I think that there's a lot of us that need to start thinking more.
How old do you reckon kids would have to be to watch this? I
wouldn't put less than an 8-year-old in front of them.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Maybe more like the 8 to 10-year-old. 10-year-old kind of range.
Yeah, although I would say, like I said, I definitely was about 7 when I tackled the books, and that was reading it on my own, and certainly they made me scared, frightened and disturbed, but in, I would say, a pretty good way. Although, as we know, screen depictions can often be a lot harder than the books.
That's what I think.
Because at least with a book you can close it and put it down and go ask your parents what it's about. So this was a great little accidental find. Thank you to the Serendipity Machine Netflix. I'll give it a good 4.5.
I'm going to give it 4 stars. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for listening, folks. Just remember, if you want to ask us to review something, email gmtrpodcast@gmail.com or comment on the Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube channels that we are reachable on. And thanks very much for listening, and we'll be in your ears next week.
Thanks, folks.